These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast. This episode of the Six Ranch Podcast is brought to you by Defend Security Cameras. Hello, everybody. Today on the podcast is just me, but I'm answering all of your questions from the internet. And to get started, how much can a woodchuck chuck? We need to know. A couple interesting things about this. This riddle or phrase or tongue twister actually dates back to somewhere between 1901 and 1903. How much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? That was in a Broadway play, and it got a sense of early virality and turned into a tongue twister that now we all know. The word woodchuck actually comes from an Algonquin word, which was something like wochuk, and it's actually a yellow-bellied marmot. It's also called a groundhog, a woodchuck, a rockchuck, depends where you're at. Another animal that we have an Algonquin word from is moose. So that is what I know about that. I actually don't know if they can chuck wood at all. I definitely don't believe that they can chuck rocks, but pretty cool little animal. Next question is, what are your top 3 need-to-know elk calls, and what is the communication meaning? If I could only have 3 elk calls, I would focus on calf, cow, and bull. Calf sounds, calves don't really know the rules all that well. They tend to make a bit more of a racket. So you can get away with calf sounds in situations that are less socially appropriate than the sounds that adult elk are going to be making. So if you're new to the when and where to make elk sounds, a calf sound is going to be a good one. Also, it's a decent way to slow down or stop a herd, because a bull knows that if a calf is left behind, that one of the cows is probably going to go back to find it, and he doesn't want to lose track of her and kind of lose control of that harem. So oftentimes some kind of frantic, like wait for me calf sounds are a good way to keep a herd from leaving. Cow sounds just can really mellow out the woods. It's a good confident sound, and also, that's a main attractant for bulls during the rut when we're doing the most calling. So just a good mellow cow sound. Don't try to mean a whole lot with it yet until you can really master that sound, and then you can start inflecting different meanings. But what I want you to focus on is just making that nice, mellow, calming cow sound that just kind of chills out the woods. So that's a good way to go. And then if you can only have one bull sound, that should be a locator bugle. There's some guys who are extremely effective at elk hunting who, once they know where a bull is, they're not going to make another sound. And a good way to detect the location of a bull is to get them to make some noise. So get good at your location bugle. Arrow ballistics for archery elk hunting. Nerd out for my 25.5-inch draw and currently pulling 58 pounds. So this is a relatively short draw length and relatively light draw weight. A lot of people would think, okay, we need to think about trajectory, so we're going to go with a lighter arrow in this case. I tend to go the other way. So if somebody's pulling a shorter draw length and has less draw weight, we actually need to stack up that arrow weight to maximize the momentum, which is different from energy. Momentum describes the force that a projectile that's flying through the air has that can continue moving forward, and how much resistance is going to be required to stop that. Yeah, so that's the real number that I want people to focus on. And there's some calculations that you can look up and figure out for that, because I don't have them memorized. But for this setup, I would think about a total arrow weight that's right around 500 grains, and I would look for a really sturdy single blade broadhead. Whether you're going to go a single bevel or double bevel is not hugely important to me. I prefer single bevel, but I think double bevels work just fine. But I do want that thing very sharp with a good, tough, resilient edge. And I want it to have the most sturdy construction you could possibly have, because if you break that broadhead on the way in, it's really going to arrest that momentum because you're increasing your drag substantially. Other things to think about is you go up in your broadhead weight, or just the total weight that's in the front of that arrow. You're going to have to increase the spine of that arrow, and all other things being equal, a heavier, stiffer spine is going to whip side to side and deflect a lot less once it makes impact. And that sideways pressure, that sidewall pressure on the arrow is very, very stopping. That's a huge force that prevents that arrow from going forward. So stiffer arrow does that less. You need a stiffer arrow if you have more weight in the front. So that's kind of an unsung advantage of having more weight in the front. Don't want you to get wrapped around the axle about FOC. As long as you have some FOC, you're going to be fine. What's your top 5 must-have items in the backcountry? Well, foremost, I need to be able to survive back there. So that's going to be 3 items right off the bat, which is going to be a way to make fire, which my favorite way is a Bic lighter, and a knife and a light. So good headlamp, good knife, good lighter, and we can make the most of a bad situation with those things. Assuming that we're hunting back there, the next things are definitely going to be our weapon of choice, whether that's a bow and all of its accoutrements, or a rifle. And then because we want to be legal, we need to have a tag. So if we've got our weapon and we've got a tag and we've got a knife, a lighter, and a light, then we can just roll on. We're going to make it. Everything else is kind of a luxury. What are 5 important pillars that make up a great foundation for outdoorsmen? Curiosity. So that thirst for knowledge, for understanding the environment, the ecology, and how all these things come together. I think that's incredibly important, so that you can keep asking questions, and that helps so much with your ability to observe. And the more you understand it, the more you can love it. I would think honesty, integrity, so that we are doing our best to kind of protect these resources and not dilute them by jading them with some type of corruption about our experience and the way that we're going out there. An eye towards sustainability. So making sure that you're not extracting more of that resource than can be replenished. And that's, the beauty of natural resources. Sharing. We need to be able to share these experiences with other people, because the more people who get to have those experiences, the more people understand and care about them and are actually going to go to bat to protect them. And then let's see, what would the last one be? A good attitude. I think, having a good attitude and making sure that you're having fun while you're out there, hugely important. So yeah, pack a good attitude with you. I'm new hunting public land. They say the county. I'm not going to say where. How do I pick good spots? The quick draw thing here is to immediately turn to like e-scouting and laying some filters on, where animals are going to be at specific times, and kind of picking apart these maps electronically. And while that can be hugely valuable, I think the better move is to find that local Greasy Spoon Cafe where all the old guys go to have coffee in the morning, and go down there and hang out with them and buy their coffees and listen and learn. And when it's appropriate, start asking questions, and then you'll start getting that knowledge that runs back 5 or 6 decades. And that's where you're going to get a major step up. And then you can go start putting boots on the ground and like really learn in that place. But finding those mentors, hugely important, and just develop a good relationship with them. You've got 20 acres and your security camera can see about 50 feet from your Wi-Fi router. Your gate, your barn, your equipment, all the places you actually need to monitor, they're exactly where your Wi-Fi doesn't reach. That's where Defend security cameras make a lot of sense. They work on cellular, just like your phone. But here's what's clever. They've got an embedded SIM card that automatically connects to the best network in your area. Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile. It finds whatever's strongest. No choosing providers, no contracts, no hassle. I'm using Defend cameras at my place. You mount it, open the Defend app on your phone, and you're done. 10 minutes. Clear footage, night vision, instant alerts, and here's something you need to know. Defend doesn't sell your data. Not to China, not to tech companies, not to anyone. They work for you, period. Defend your place. Moving on. What's a moment in your life that changed how you see yourself as a person? I feel like I have these moments every day, but to try to pick out a single moment, I might have to go back to Afghanistan. My first major combat operation, there's a terrible incident where my platoon was hit by a mortar. One of my Marines was killed. Several others, including myself, were badly injured. My job as an officer in that role would have been to move into the fight and do everything I could to repel that enemy. What I actually did was focused on the first aid for those wounded Marines. That was not commensurate with my training. That's not what was expected of me. But that's what I did. So I guess what I learned about myself was that in that moment of high stress, I cared more about trying to save the lives of those wounded Marines than I did about taking the fight to the enemy. I will also say that from a tactical standpoint, the best first aid you can offer is to win the fight first. So I'm not saying that I did the right thing. I don't know that there was a right thing to do in that situation, but that was definitely a time that I learned something about myself. Why do hunters, when asked, say they don't know or can't explain completely why they love to hunt? I think that with this, there's a degree of fear that comes along with it. And they're afraid that if they are honest and that they do talk about all these aspects of hunting that they really love to someone who doesn't hunt, that won't be received well, because how could that person understand everything? And I think we need to get over that fear as a community and be able to really openly and honestly talk about what it is about hunting that we love and that we enjoy. And if somebody can't understand part of that or has resistance to part of that, then we can talk about that specific thing, but try not to be afraid to say what it is that you love about hunting and see how that goes. How to increase your odds while shed hunting. Now, I don't love shed hunting. I actually don't even enjoy shed hunting. It's something that I do at work. And I've done for a long time. I used to love it when I was a little kid, but it wasn't anything that I was crazy about. It was just kind of fun to find an antler lying on the ground. What I will say about where to find sheds is it's a bit random when an animal is going to drop, when they're going to drop those antlers. So we can think about the time of year that they're going to be dropping, first of all, and then wherever they're going to spend the greatest amount of time during that time of year is going to be the highest likelihood of where you find those antlers. So if they're spending most of their time out grazing on a south-facing hillside that has fresh grass growing on it, that's a good place to start. If they're spending most of their time bedded down in some timber or some stuff that can give them thermal cover like brush, talking about whitetail here, that might be a better place. Along fence lines where there's going to be a jarring experience from them jumping over the top. Sometimes you can find more sheds along fence lines. But just think about that animal and where it's spending the most of its time, and then spend most of your time in that area, and you should be able to pick up a few more sheds. Best thermal option for an AR. I am testing several new thermals in the coming weeks, and I'm really excited about that. I recently tested a SIG Echo SV50 laser range finding thermal. I think that's a pretty good thermal for the money, and I feel like I could identify a coyote at around 350, 400 yards without optic, and I'd have a really high odds percentage of a hit between 250 and 300 yards, which in the real world is a long ways on a coyote in the wild. Especially if we're talking about calling at night, where more than likely you're going to be shooting standing off of a tripod, so you're giving up on some stability, and coyote is a relatively small target. I do think that's a good option. What I'll say with thermals is, please invest, more money in your thermal viewer than you do in your thermal scope. You're going to spend 95% of your time or more in that viewer looking around to try to identify and detect these animals that are coming into a call or coming into a bait site or whatever. And then you're going to spend a small percentage of that time actually in your scope. So invest in that thermal handheld a little bit more so. And then, whether it's AR or bolt gun, I don't think really changes that much about which thermal I'm going to select, because I need it to be on a really accurate rifle. So if it is on an AR, then I want it to be a very accurate AR. How would you change wolf hunting regulations to make it have population controlling influence? Most of the studies that are out there indicate that if you're not reducing a wolf population by 50% every single year, that wolf population is going to continue to grow. So states have not historically been able to do that with the control means that we currently have. I think Wyoming is probably as close to anybody. And the approach that Wyoming has taken is for most of the state, wolves are treated with the same controls as coyotes. So you can hunt them, trap them all year long, and that seems to work pretty well. I would remind people that wolves have been a significant issue in the United States for a very long time. Some of the first meetings in the colonies, way back before we ever became a country, were about wolves. The reason that Oregon became a state instead of a territory in 1859 was so that they could establish a wolf bounty. That was the first item of business in their very first meeting as a state. And with that bounty, they used, the monetary gain of bringing in a wolf. They allowed poisoning, trapping, shooting of all kinds. There's no controls over that whatsoever. And it took almost 100 years of that before wolves were eradicated from Oregon. Without those poisons and controls like that, which I don't support, I don't think that wolf eradication is even possible through recreational hunting, including trapping, even including bounties. So I really truly believe that we could completely open it up and put wolves under the same rules as coyotes, and that would give us our best opportunity at population control. However, even with that, wolves are here to stay. So if you're a wolf fan, that's good news for you. If you are a fan of the idea of wolf hunting and wolf trapping, then that should be good news for you as well. But yeah, wolf advocates don't want to see any wolves hunted or trapped recreationally. And the correct number for their wolf population ideas is more, whereas a lot of people have the idea that the correct wolf population is less. It's just one of these things. It's going to forever be complicated. Do you really need red dots for turkey hunting? Absolutely not. And that's a good question. With some of these very tight chokes at especially closer ranges, a red dot is pretty nice for actually refining down exactly where the middle of that shot swarm is going to be. The farther out you get, the less important that is. I think I've probably killed just as many turkeys shooting off of a bead as I do a red dot, but I do prefer a red dot. So it's handy, but it's not necessary. How to find the time. Time management is an interesting thing. And I think where a lot of people stumble with time management is that they underestimate how long a project will take. So if you think that a project will take an hour, I'm going to go ahead and budget an hour and a half for that project. Then if it runs over, that doesn't interfere with the rest of the things that I have to do that day. If it runs under, then I can either take a little bit of a break, I can prepare more for the next project. But I find that I can actually get a heck of a lot more done and then create opportunities for free time if I over budget for how much time I think something is going to take. So I think that that's a good question, and that's my approach to solving it. What tactics would you suggest for Western Oregon cougar hunting? Being very upfront, I've never hunted in Western Oregon. I don't know a lot about it, but I have hunted, lots of places around the world and done so for a long time. I would think that baiting is a good opportunity for you over there. That seems to be pretty effective over here on the east side. I would try calling. I would also be talking to your local wildlife biologist and seeing if there's places where there are higher populations or higher densities of cougars, because then you're going to have more conflict in that area. So it's going to create some higher likelihood opportunities for you to call. But yeah, you're just going to have to spend a lot of time at it, and don't treat it like a hunt where you're going to get it done in a day or two. Think about it like it's a campaign for the year, and you're going to spend, 30 or more trips out there to try to call, and just keep working at it and enjoy it and see what you can learn every time. And if you stay with it, you're going to be successful. How do you decide how long to wait to go back to a coyote stand? This is an interesting one. So I've got a lot of coyote stands that are just producers for me, where it seems like every time I go there, I end up calling a coyote in. And then I've got others that used to be producers and now no longer are. And I continue to go back with the hope that they're going to produce again. I am going to wait a minimum of 6 months before I go back to a coyote stand. But a lot of them, I'm only hunting once a year. What is your favorite vegetable to garden for yield, taste, difficulty, whatever? This is probably going to surprise no one, but I am a big fan of the tater, big fan of the spud. Potatoes grow very, very well in my soil here. They produce a huge amount of food that is a superfood. It's very healthy, very good for you. There's a lot of different ways to cook it. They store well. I'll plant my potatoes as soon as the leaves are fully on the trees, and then I'll actually leave them in the ground until those plants fall over, and like the leaves are all dead in the fall. And I can actually leave those potatoes in the ground until we get our first hard frost, and then go ahead and dig them up, put them in burlap bags, hang them up in my garage where it's cool. I do have plans to make a root cellar at some point, which would help even more. But yeah, taters are king. Colorado elk hunt, public land near, not going to say where, out-of-state hunter. How would that work? Man, when I'm going to hunt a new place out of state, I'm going to try and get as much knowledge from people who have hunted there as possible. So a good way to do that is to talk to some of these like tag management agencies, whether that is, Hunt and Fool or The Draw or something like that. A lot of times they have staff experts who know a lot about those areas. And if you're using a service like what they provide to manage preference points or to help you with draws, then part of that is going to be giving you advice on how to hunt that area, which is just hugely valuable. Do you think using hounds will make a comeback? Seems like more people are getting out. It's tough. Hound hunting is tough, especially with the wolf situation, because we've got wolves that are killing a lot of hound dogs while people are out bobcat hunting. The generational skill there is going away. Hound hunting typically is something that you learn from somebody else in your family, somebody close by. And yeah, as that draws down, it's harder and harder. It's also wildly expensive to keep and train dogs all year long. The equipment that goes along with hound hunting is really, really tough. If we started hunting cougars with dogs again in Oregon, I think you would see a comeback, and you'd see this younger generation step up and start running dogs again, because it's a great way to control the cougar population. It's very difficult. It's very engaging. And it's just so wildly misunderstood. People think that these dogs are catching these cats on the ground and biting them, tearing them apart. It's nothing like that. They think these cougars are afraid for their lives and just, running and frantic. And yeah, they run away for sure. It's cats and dogs. This is an old game. But when you walk up to a tree and see a cougar sitting in it, it looks bored. Like it'll have its paws crossed on a limb, its tail switching back and forth. It's just mean mugging you. They look more inconvenienced than scared. So it's just a lot of misunderstanding, but a very, very difficult hunt. And anyways, would love to see it come back. What is the one accomplishment you're most proud of? I'm not one for being proud of myself all that often. I shot range high one time, back when I was in the Marine Corps, and there were several thousand Marines who were out on the range that week, and I had the best score of all of them, and I was pretty proud of myself for that. That felt good. Where's somewhere you'd love to live and learn for a year, for hunting, fishing, or just cool stuff? Africa. Whether that's South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, Mozambique, Tanzania, somewhere in South or East Africa, I would just love it. I would love it so much. I'd love to learn tracking and some of those skills from those guys who have lived down there. Top 5 fishing and hunting trips. So many to pick from. Let's start doing it. Tanzania, East Africa, tremendous trip. South Africa, tremendous trip. Love both of those places immensely. Can't wait to go back. Northern Australia, absolute adventure. Australians are completely mad. The wildlife is crazy. The scenery is crazy. The hunting styles are cool. Learned a lot on that trip. Spear fishing in Baja is just so sick. Can't wait to do it again. A huge amount of sea life there. Some big animals in the water, and it's just exciting. It's a really cool world and great food. So gotta love that. And then I'm going to go with a bit of a curveball, which is rifle cow elk in early October. One of my very favorite hunts in the whole world. The place that I do it is relatively flat. It's dense trees. The bulls are still bugling. So I'm calling my way into these herds. I can never see very far. So it's this like sort of call, spot and stalk, still hunting vibe. But I get to use a rifle instead of a bow, so I'm that much more lethal. I get all the elements of an archery elk hunt with the calling and the terrain and that tactical approach. But then I also get to select, a nice fat cow to shoot with my rifle, and that's very, very good meat. So I love that one. Does the sage rat provide any positive impact to the landscape shared with livestock? Sage rat, ground squirrel, gopher, they get called a lot of different things. I'm going to go with no. They eat a fair bit of grass, and then the holes that they dig actually provide a pretty significant hazard to animals who might step in those holes. They also attract badgers, which create even bigger holes, which are an even bigger threat to animals, like livestock, talking horses, cattle, stuff like that. And all the dirt that they dig up actually ends up covering a huge amount of grass that would otherwise be growing for these livestock. There is a theory that in some thin soil areas that eventually rodent mounds and rodent activity will build soil there. And that's one of the theories behind some of these humps that we find throughout the prairies in some regions. I don't know how much I believe that. If anything, that would take thousands of years. So I'm just going to go with no. I don't think that there's much positive that they bring to the fight. What is your formula for packing underwear for a trip, in case you shart yourself? Yeah, real thing can happen, especially if you're traveling to funky places with some high likelihood of funky water or funky food. I plan on a pair of underwear on a trip about every 4 days. And I use either Bamboo Cool or Ex Officio underwear, and those are antimicrobial. They don't start stinking nearly as quickly, and they're comfortable. The elasticity stays there. They last for a good long time, and they're also both really easy to clean, even if you don't have access to a washing machine. Like, you can just kind of wring them out in whatever water you got around, a little bit of soap, and you're back in business. They dry out quickly. What's your favorite aha moment to witness when guiding novice hunters? For me, especially if that's a new hunter, that is this feeling that they get when they first kill an animal. And they are speechless. They're overwhelmed with this complexity of excitement and satisfaction and wonder and, gratitude and reverence. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool getting to watch that. I love it a lot. What's the spread on your clients that are hunting novices versus experienced? At this stage, not very many of my clients are novices, but I certainly enjoy that when I do get those opportunities. And a few of my clients have hunted elk longer than I've been alive, and I've been hunting elk for 31 years now. And gosh, there's way more about elk that I want to learn and I'm curious about now than stuff that I actually consider that I know. What's the most rewarding part of guiding? Yeah, getting that sort of vicarious experience of getting to see somebody experience new things that I love, and understanding that passion that was just ignited in them that is now going to cost them ginormous amounts of time and money and all the stuff that comes along with it. But yeah, just kind of that vicarious newness. I really enjoy that. I also love cutting meat getting to butcher these animals. That's awesome. What's the most moving moment you've had in nature witnessing wildlife? That would be spearfishing for marlin. Striped marlin are just this absolutely incredible animal. And when they get bait fish like sardines balled up on the surface, these sardines, they're getting attacked by birds from the top, and then you'll see this school of marlin that might be 100 feet down below them, and they're just gray. They're just gliding around in the super clear water. And then when it's their turn to attack, these ultraviolet fluorescent blue stripes and spots light up over their whole body, and that is from a body temperature increase. And then they zoom up and kill a fish and eat it, and then they go back down. And they take turns doing that. And I've told people this, but if we saw wolves do something like that, like if there was a pack of wolves that had, an elk sorted off in a meadow, and then one of the wolves started glowing and it ran in and took a bite and then came back out, and another wolf started glowing, like we would call the CIA. We would call the president and be like, hey, aliens are here. This is nuts. Getting to be in the water with marlin and watch that happen is just a magical experience. It's mind-blowing. What's your pick for a fun, modern revolver? I'm not big into the revolvers, man. I shot them a lot growing up because that was just the time, right? The semi-autos were still kind of coming on. Now I don't see a lot of advantage to a revolver. There are some advantages, especially if you're trying to get into a larger caliber. Then a revolver is going to be a clear choice. They're ultra reliable, but they tend to be heavier than a semi-auto and can carry less ammo, and they're slower to reload. I shot cowboy action for a long time when I was younger, and I shot a Ruger Vaquero, and it was in 45 long Colt. It's a great big gun. It was a lot of fun. I've shot, a million rounds through that gun. Really like it, but I certainly wouldn't carry it around. One cut of beef for the rest of your life. I'm going to go with New York strip. So that's going to be a little bit tougher than a ribeye, but it's very consistent bite to bite. I think the fat cap on it is a little bit sweeter. There's a few more ways to cook it. It's less expensive than those other middle meats, and it's a good size. So I'm going to pick that one. Duck fat versus beef tallow. I love them both. I absolutely love them both. I think if I'm going to go with like anything that's starchy, I'm going to prefer to cook it in duck fat, and then meat, I prefer to cook in beef tallow. Not going to say the guy's name, but is so-and-so drawing attention to a loophole that's going to result in getting it banned? Now, this is a real fear, and what we're talking about here is the current method of using bait to attract cougars. Now, this is working, and because of it, more cougars have been harvested this year, but with the intent of cougar hunting than in any of the previous years that I can remember in my life. And we desperately need that because our mule deer populations are absolutely crashing. Our elk population is absolutely crashing. So a reduction in the cougar population is going to be helpful for these prey species making their way back up, because this declining population of ungulates is a problem. So first we need to stabilize, and then we actually need to increase these populations to get them back to the management objective level. And without more predator control, that's not going to happen. Of course, there are people who don't want to see any cougar hunting happening, but believe it or not, there are a lot of biologists at the state level who understand that this is a problem, despite the political pressure that they feel to do anything around predators and some of the fear that they have around that. Trust me, biologists understand that this is a problem, and they want solutions out there. So I certainly hope not. I hope not. Are you a map and compass or GPS guy? I'm a GPS guy. I get lost like crazy. I have a horrible, horrible sense of direction. I do carry a compass with me. When I was fighting fire back in college, I was on a helicopter rappel crew, and I would sit backwards in the helicopter. I didn't have good comms. Sometimes I wouldn't even know what state I was in when I got kicked out of the door to rappel down to the fire. And my first job, upon getting to the ground and assessing that fire, was to figure out where I was on the map using township, range, and section, and get down to hopefully a quarter of a quarter section, and then relay that up to dispatch for where our fire location was. Using terrain and a compass to try to identify that is massively challenging, and without a huge amount of skill leads to inaccuracy, whereas a GPS is going to get you so much closer. You can be more interactive. Now, the GPS requires electricity, so if a battery fails or if your equipment gets damaged, you're up a creek. But you can certainly damage a map or compass too. So in either case, you need to take care of your stuff. But yeah, if you could only have one, I think the more reliable system is going to be a compass and a map. But man, it takes a lot of skill and the right type of terrain to be able to use that. If you're in relatively flat terrain and you can't shoot an azimuth off to a couple different mountain peaks to triangulate where you are, boy, you're gonna struggle. Why aren't single shot rifles more popular in the U.S.? Big increase in the U.K. Probably because there's not a lot of advantage to a single shot rifle. They can be really beautiful. One of my favorite rifles that I don't own anymore was a Ruger number 1. It had a rolling block action, or drop block action, I think they're called. It was a gorgeous gun, and I've been enthralled with that rifle since I was a little kid, since I first saw one. I love the way the action closes. It's like a bank vault. It's got very few moving parts, super reliable. It just feels and looks good. But, the reality is it just doesn't provide much in the way of benefit over a bolt action rifle. So I think that's probably why. In April 2023, you were late. Why? Has it happened since? Yeah. Going back to what I talked about previously, I got lost. Yep, I got lost, and I ended up late and ended up going up and down the wrong road while towing my boat. Torched the brakes on my truck in doing so. Had to go back to town and get gas, and then showed up late. I am a timely person. I work very hard to be on time, as early as is socially acceptable. But gosh, that was a rugged one. So yeah, thanks for reminding me, bro. Has it happened since? I don't think so. What would you do differently if you were to reintroduce a bill at the state level again? My approach tends to be from a standpoint of logic, rationality, data. And what I found is that actually doesn't resonate that well with people who are driven emotionally in their decision-making process. And if we're talking about a wildlife-related issue, like hunting cougars with dogs, the people who oppose that tend to oppose it from an emotional standpoint. So if I were to reintroduce a bill at the state level again, in this case, this was Senator Nash who introduced this bill. I was just supporting it, so I don't want to take any of my dad's credit there. But I would go at it from an emotional standpoint, and I would try to drum up emotion for why people should be supporting this rather than just data. because numbers seem to be losing to feelings. Opinions on solar panels going in and how that's going to affect wildlife. So there have been some large-scale solar projects in parts of Eastern Oregon to support data centers. So they're using huge amounts of electricity, like gigawatts of electricity. Currently, 11% of all the electricity in Oregon is going to data centers. We are rich in the resource of hydropower, but currently our hydropower is getting exported to California primarily, at least from my region. And then the power that we're using, even though we're right next to these great big hydro dams, is coming from coal, which is being burned in Wyoming. So there's a huge amount of loss in efficiency as this power travels around. And I think, people are making money at that loss, but a little bit unfortunate. Solar has 1 horsepower of energy per square meter of sunlight, and we're able to actually convert anywhere between 18 and I think up to 28% of that energy. There are more efficient solar panels out there than that, but they start to get really expensive. How that solar has affected wildlife is it's a dead zone. It is a dead zone underneath those solar panels. So that's a habitat loss for all the wildlife that requires that space. Energy demands are going to be a huge part of our future, and my take from a physics standpoint is that micronuclear is going to be what we need. But due to the slowness of how we build stuff, because of the regulations that we impose on ourselves, I think we're a long ways out from getting that stuff in place. China is currently kicking our butts in that. They're putting up lots and lots of micronuclear, and it's going very well for them. When adjusting a load for better standard deviation or extreme spread, which is the velocity component of a projectile, what is the first thing you change? So I want my extreme spread, so my fastest shot and my slowest shot, to be as close together as possible so that my velocity is very consistent. As I do that, my standard deviation is going to be much, much smaller as well. And that's the greatest likelihood of how far away from my average is my fastest and slowest shots going to be, or my most common fast or slow shots. The first thing I'm going to adjust is the amount of powder that I put in there. So I'm going to make a set of different loads, usually 5 shots each, and they're going to increase in 0.3 grain increments up until the point where I start to see signs of pressure, like swipes from my ejector, heavy bolt lift, flattening on the primer, things like that. As soon as I get to that pressure, then I know I can't go any farther up. But I'm going to look for a place where, as I increase the powder charge, the velocity does not increase. And that's what we call a plateau. And I'll go to the higher point of that plateau, and then I'll start to work off that. Now, one of the biggest things you can do to reduce SD and ES once you're at that point is to make sure you have really consistent neck tension. And the way I'm currently doing that is I'm annealing my brass to 400 degrees Celsius, and then I'm resizing it with a full-length sizing die that has the ball taken out of the middle of it. And then I'm using a mandrel that is 2 1,000ths of an inch smaller than my bullet diameter. And when I pull the mandrel down with my press, I leave it for a count of 5 so that brass can take a moment to relax, because brass has spring back, and I want it to relax around that. And that's how I get a little bit better, more consistent neck tension. That is my current methodology. After that, you're going to play with seating depth and things like that to improve your group size and see how far your bullet should be off the lands. But that's my quick and dirty for SD and ES. What's the greatest memory of you and your grandmother? Going out and fishing the irrigation ditch, going out by this old cottonwood tree out in an irrigation field, digging for worms in the garden, catching grasshoppers and going out there and catching little rainbow trout in this ditch underneath this cottonwood tree as a little kid. Those are some of my earliest memories of recreation, and it changed my life. And I got to do that with my grandma. Pretty awesome. All right, folks, that is all the questions I'm going to answer this week. Let me know if you enjoyed this episode. Shoot me a DM or leave a comment or a review on the podcast. And if you like it, we'll do it again sometime. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that you get yourself out in the woods and get out on the rivers and the lakes and the ponds and the creeks and just have yourself a wonderful time this week. Bye, everybody. Thank you to everyone who has taken the time out of their busy lives to write a review for the show and share it with their friends. I'm extremely proud of how intelligent, engaged, and adventurous this audience is. Original music for the Six Ranch podcast is written and performed by Justin Hay. Art for the Six Ranch podcast was created by John Chatelain and digitized by Celia Harlander. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.